I had a great time with the $20,000 I recently saved up. After returning from a week-long trip overseas, my mother-in-law Isabella called me excitedly, mentioning something about saving $20,000. I was puzzled because I didn't remember having such a large sum. As a freelancer, I do have some emergency savings in my bank account, but I don't usually keep that much cash. Plus, my banking card was right here, and no one else should be able to withdraw such a large amount without my knowledge. Isabella claimed she took the money from the sideboard drawer, assuming we were rich. I thanked her for her good intentions but didn't understand why she thought I had given her the money. After this brief conversation, I wondered where the $20,000 came from. The mystery was solved when Anthony, presumably her husband, returned home a month later. Fast forward to a month later, and Isabella made over 80 calls, which I ignored. When I finally answered, she accused me of something, and I didn't quite understand. It seemed like she was upset, but I couldn't figure out why. Isabella's persistent calls became annoying, and when I finally answered, she started blaming me for something. Confused, I realized she was reaping what she had sown. Isabella's voice echoed loudly through the phone speaker as I learned her name was Scarlett, a 32-year-old freelance jewelry designer. I really want children, but my job keeps me very busy. My husband, Anthony, who is the same age as me, used to have a regular job, but now he helps manage my work. When we got married, I wasn't making much as a designer, and we relied on Anthony's income. However, as I turned 30, my work became more stable, and I needed help managing my schedule. Anthony, who had a good position at his job, decided to quit and join me as a business partner. With his help, we now have deals with famous international brands. Although we face challenges as a couple, the main issue is Anthony's mother, Isabella, who lives alone in his family home. Isabella thinks we're living a luxurious life and often asks for money. She believes we live extravagantly, attending fancy parties and dinners with company executives. While these events are part of my job as a jewelry designer, Isabella sees them as leisure. She even asks for money to throw a party for her friends. I can afford to give her money, but it's not as glamorous as it seems. These events are expensive, and I have business obligations that I can't refuse. We're now living in luxury. It's all part of our work, dressing up beautifully and eating at expensive places. Isabella often expresses her envy towards us with a hint of sarcasm. Despite my continuous refusals to her requests, Anthony, being her son, sometimes gives in and hands her money. He believes it's a small price to pay to keep her quiet and avoid interruptions to our work. However, Isabella's demands only increase, leaving both of us frustrated. Recently, Isabella came over and pestered Anthony about buying a new dress for an upcoming gathering. Despite suggesting a more affordable two-piece suit, she insisted on an expensive dress for the fancy party. I believe proper attire, whether old or new, shouldn't matter, but Isabella makes a fuss. She also added that she needed a matching bag and was counting on us for that. To address Isabella's constant money demands, Anthony set up a credit card in her name, telling her to use it for her expenses. Initially, she overspent and got warned by Anthony. He then asked her to report before making significant purchases. However, Isabella continued to overspend, once even buying an expensive ring without prior notice. The bill became astronomical, and Anthony, who was paying the bills, couldn't afford it. Isabella seemed to think the credit card meant endless spending without consequences. Anthony, frustrated with the situation, decided to put a limit on her card spending. Isabella stormed in, complaining that she couldn't pay for her recent shopping, not realizing the financial strain her overspending was causing us. "We've lowered your monthly limit, but it's still enough, right?" Isabella challenged, questioning the fairness of our lifestyle. She argued that her desire for fun and luxury wasn't much different from our work-related dressing up and attending fancy places. We explained that events like product launches and parties were part of our job, often taking place in luxurious venues. However, Isabella perceived it as us having fun rather than working. Since putting a limit on her credit card, she had quieted down a bit. Occasionally, she would come to our house and complain to Anthony, but life went on without major issues. As the year end approached, a foreign brand approached me with a proposal to expand our business overseas. Excited about the opportunity, I saw it as a chance to join the ranks of top-tier designers. Anthony, handling things as my manager, saw it as a rare opportunity we had to take. However, there was a concern about Isabella. Given her past behavior, it was plausible that she might want to come with us. When we told her about our plans that weekend, she reacted just as we predicted. Isabella insisted we were trying to trick her and live even more lavishly overseas. Anthony tried to explain that it was for work, not leisure, but Isabella wouldn't give up, fearing we planned to move there permanently. "We'll come back after our work settles down overseas," I reassured Isabella. She seemed worried that our plans would leave her behind. Both Anthony and I were exhausted from this circular argument. We couldn't take her with us, but Anthony, worn out from convincing her, suggested paying for a week-long trip for her instead. "Really? Are you sure?" Isabella half-happily accepted, and Anthony promised to cover her flight and hotel expenses. However, the peace didn't last long. A few days later, while Anthony was busy with overseas arrangements, Isabella visited our house. "Anthony said that, but I want to shop over there too. Can you give me some money?" she requested. I asked about the card Anthony had given her, and she admitted he had taken it away, fearing she might misuse it with different currency rates overseas. I explained that I couldn't give her money without Anthony's approval. Isabella left, raising her voice, and over the New Year's, she went on a 7-day trip abroad. Upon her return, Isabella revealed an unbelievable truth. She called me excitedly, sharing her experiences and mentioning she had overspent on souvenirs. Feeling fed up, I asked about the money she claimed I had saved up for her. I had no recollection of such money, and the situation took an unexpected turn. I had some savings in my bank account for business emergencies, but Isabella couldn't possibly withdraw cash from it. Despite what she claimed, I had no memory of it. She said she found $20,000 in our house's sideboard drawer, and I was confused about why such money would be there. I couldn't imagine us keeping such a large amount of cash at home. I told Isabella that if she took money from our house without permission, it amounted to theft, even if she's family. I emphasized the seriousness of the situation, especially if Anthony had set the money aside for an important deal. There hadn't been any disruption in our business dealings or payments while Isabella was on her trip. Isabella nonchalantly admitted to using the money, saying, "I'm telling you now that I used it." I pointed out that taking someone else's money without permission is a crime and expressed my concern about her entitled reasoning. Isabella defended herself, saying, "You too live so extravagantly, so why can't I have a little of that?" Think of it as doing a favor for your parent. I found her reasoning inappropriate, considering she took money without asking. I promised to ask Anthony about the money when he got back. Isabella believed Anthony would understand, being his only mother, and claimed that $20,000 wasn't much to him. I agreed to pass along the message, still uncertain about the entire situation. I was amazed at Isabella's lack of awareness, and she ended the call by saying, "Please tell him that, thanks." Still baffled by the $20,000 in cash at home, I asked Anthony about it when he returned that night. Anthony had withdrawn the money from his bank account 10 days ago for an urgent payment. He needed cash immediately, but I was surprised that he kept such a large sum in a drawer, considering the potential risks. Anthony, looking troubled, asked if I knew anything about it. Today, Isabella called, thanking us for the $20,000 and mentioning she had a blast with it. I didn't understand what she meant, but it turned out the money was Anthony's after all. However, we still didn't know what such a large amount was meant for. I questioned Anthony about why he had left such a large sum at home, especially when we usually did bank transfers. Anthony explained that after limiting Isabella's credit card amount, she had secretly borrowed money from various sources, including consumer finance cards and credit cards she had opened without his knowledge. When Anthony discovered this, he took all her cards and prepared the cash to repay Isabella's growing debt. Although he gave her the cash, he knew she might spend it recklessly. The situation became clearer, but the mystery of Isabella's actions remained. I planned to pay the institutions directly through bank transfers, but Anthony preferred fewer records in our bank accounts for the sake of trust with our business partners in bookkeeping. So he decided to withdraw the cash and pay individually. Supporting Isabella's overseas trip was like a parting gift, knowing we wouldn't be able to take care of her like before after moving abroad. As time passed, Isabella's calls to my mobile phone became frequent, almost 80 calls every day. Anthony had advised me not to bother with her, but the persistence made me concerned. One day, Isabella's voice sounded almost like a cry as she apologized for bothering me during the busy moving preparations. She explained that she was receiving payment demands almost every day, and Anthony seemed to be blocking her calls. Isabella couldn't get through to him and pleaded for my help, saying I was her only hope. I was surprised that Anthony would take such a drastic step with his own mother. If he had used the money he prepared to pay off Isabella's debts, this situation might have been avoided. Now, Isabella was inundated with collection letters from finance companies and consumer lenders, facing non-stop collections calls and seeming helpless to do anything about it. It was a scene I had only seen in dramas before. I mentioned it to Anthony, but I couldn't predict his response. Isabella pleaded for help, saying it was a son's duty to assist his mother. The call ended, and I told Anthony about it when he returned home, but he dismissed it coldly, stating that Isabella wasted the opportunity herself. Despite the continued calls from Isabella, I decided to block her number, following Anthony's lead. While I wished I could help, being Anthony's mother meant there was nothing I could do if he had chosen to ignore her. As the day of our move overseas approached, I needed to finish packing. Looking around the still cluttered room, I couldn't shake the lingering feeling of helplessness in the face of Isabella's predicament. It turned out that Isabella had to sell her house to settle her debts. In addition to the $20,000 Anthony had intended to use for repayment, she had hidden even more debts. The amount was so substantial that even after selling her land and house, she couldn't fully clear it. The total balance was unimaginable. Our family home was gone, and Anthony, though somewhat sad, acknowledged there was nothing we could do. Losing the house where one grew up must have felt like a significant loss. Anthony, having lost his place to return to because of his living mother, must have been feeling a deep sense of loss. Isabella now lived in a cheap apartment, struggling to repay the remaining debts with her part-time job. At her age, finding work must be challenging. I felt a bit of sympathy for her. However, the consequences of her spending led to this, so she was to blame. Even for the elderly, taking responsibility for their actions is necessary. Despite the challenges, my business was thriving overseas, and the move had brought more inquiries from other brands. I received offers from unexpected places, something I couldn't have imagined back home. Although it was all appreciated, I was so busy that I barely had time to sleep. Anthony, too, was occupied with various tasks. At this rate, having children was still a distant thought. I pondered this as I gazed at the foreign cityscape outside the window.